The public, their only lens into connection with homeless people is the begging transaction, and it causes people anxiety.
Yeah.
When people come to MOH, it was reversing that. Purposely in our first show, How to Survive the Apocalypse, was about, society needs to learn from people who have lived homelessness, because there's some survival skills there that we might just need in these times. It flipped the idea that you'd come to a museum of homelessness out of pity. The idea that a museum could ever be apolitical is absolute rubbish. We were looking at all these sites over London. We got offered a morgue in a Victorian workhouse.
Ugh.
Right? We got offered a visitor centre at a women's prison that had shut down. That was a dark day.
A homeless museum
exactly.
Without a home.
Right.
Sorry, I had to go there.
No, it's got to be done. Our people are coming into the site every day in massive levels of distress. And sometimes it just feels really overwhelming. Get resources, share them. That's community building, that's community power. Babies are freezing to death in this country, like what the hell? Those babies are dying because of political choices, and it's so heartbreaking. And just to keep watching the situation get worse and worse, and it's the same in the States, right? Yeah. It could be solved, because it doesn't seem like it's turning around, does it? If you just get angry and shout, people are not going to listen. If you make something beautiful, or if you make something special, they're going to listen.
Today's guest is Jessica Turtle, co-director and co-founder of the Museum of Homelessness in London. I gotta tell you, oh my gosh, such an amazing organization. When I first heard of the Museum of Homelessness, I thought, well, that's a great idea. We have a section on our website about the history of homelessness, and I think it's important to learn about the past, so hopefully we don't repeat it. So I thought it was just a normal, traditional museum. I was wrong. It is so much better. Yes, they have archival stuff, but gosh, it's so hard to put into words what the Museum of Homelessness does. Maybe that's why I love it so much. They provide a community that's run by people with lived experience. During the winter, it becomes a shelter to keep people warm. They provide the best they can, case management services. They need more resources to do more. And they have art exhibitions. Like right now, why we advance this in the queue, as they say, is because they have an exhibition called Criminal that you need to go check out if you are in London or will be visiting London. This interview is amazing, and you're just gonna have to watch or listen yourself. This is a good one. I'm excited that get to spend time with you. I was excited about visiting the Museum of Homelessness because I wanted to be able to talk about it. And even after visiting the Museum of Homelessness, I still have trouble putting it into words. So tell us about the Museum of Homelessness and how it started.
Cool. Well, first of all, Mark, it was so good to welcome you to the site. It was a really big deal for us. The museum site, I think, is many things because it needs to be. And the day that you visited, we were coming out of our seasonal winter mode. So, people were painting, levelling the new path that we've dug, and basically getting ready to open into the spring-summer season where we invite the public in to educate people on homelessness. During the winter, we close and we only do community work. And that includes, whether it's resources from the cupboard, a good meal, or in the emergency weather, the museum becomes a cold weather shelter. So that's something that we do through the winter times. And then we reopen to the public in the spring, summer, and we do our educational work. So it's quite a little site, isn't it? But it has to work quite hard. And everything that we've designed into it means that it can be multifunctional. And the inspiration for how the site runs and the community that we build there comes from a community that I was born into, which was a community of homeless people in Cardiff in Wales, set up by my mum and dad. And my dad had been very long-term street homeless prior to that, in the streets of London. That community I was born into was by no means perfect. And Mark, better probably than most people, like homelessness is many things. So it is community, it is connection, it is care, it is love, but it is also some really brutal things. And the trauma that people are carrying can make it a community where bad things happen as well. So not to mention everything that our community is up against with the rest of the world and the other aspects of society. So that community that I was born into, though, has been the blueprint for MOH and for how it runs, because, in my opinion, that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Not in the UK, not really. Yeah. And it was like professionalised out of the sector. You know, people became clients. Everything became contracted, commissioned by government for a large part. Yeah. Maybe where there had been not enough boundaries. And so, you know, it was Wild West when that grassroots movement started, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You know, but maybe where there was less boundaries than was needed, it's gone too far the other way. Things are too rigid. So you need that sweet spot in the middle where people are safe, but people are loved. And love is not a safeguarding word. That's what we always say. It's not a safeguarding issue. And so I think what you feel when you come on site to Museum of Homelessness, whether we're doing storytelling art, having jacket spuds or whatever's going on, is that. And we try and show people rather than tell. And so that's what we've set up the site to do.
Because the way you just explained it and framing it in what I do, the work that I do, so primarily, I mean, it's really hard to explain. I mean, it is community. Even when I was arriving, you sent me a message saying, hey, I'm going to be busy. I'm speaking to someone, trying to get them help. So your priority is helping people, but you open up for the summer to educate people. And what I didn't get until basically now, although I saw a little bit of it, is that you're an education and awareness campaign based first on community with people sleeping rough.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's the thing. And the thing that we didn't quite anticipate the power of, like you're spot on with this. So we have our education, our storytelling, we have, you know, the new exhibition is going to be about criminalization of homelessness. People will come in, they will read the panels. We've got unique historical research. We're really excited about that. That, again, the community is carried out because people are talented, people are clever, and we've done all that in a group. But the thing I think that really is transformative for social relations is our place might be one of the only places where people can come, have an interaction with someone who's homeless that isn't a begging transaction. Yeah. So the public, we also shouldn't put the public into a blob, because that's what I get annoyed when people say they're homeless. We do it with the public. But when visitors come, they often say, the first thing they say is, should I give money or not? That's the main question that they're worried about. And we just say, let's zoom out and let's look at the causes of homelessness. Whether you want to give money or not, that's not the issue. Yeah. But their only lens into connection with homeless people is the begging transaction. And it causes people anxiety. Yeah. But when people come to MOH, the community's got something to share. So it's reversing that. You know, we purposely in our first show, How to Survive the Apocalypse, was about, you know, society needs to learn from people who have lived homelessness, because there's some survival skills there that we might just need in these times. So it flipped the idea that you'd come to a museum of homelessness out of pity, you know, and we physically gave people gifts to go away with. Yeah. They got a healing balm that they took away with them that we'd made out of daisies in the garden. And that was, it's a power move really, because it's saying, look, we've got stuff to give to you. Right, you know? Right. We're not draining society. We've got stuff to give.
A couple of things, because, you know, street papers here, it's the big issue, is very popular. And many of them will say, well, we're providing resources for homeless people. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. The point I'm trying to make, to me, the benefit is that it's a positive interaction with someone. You know, because usually, as you said, it's begging. Somebody is begging. So here, it's a street paper. But you remind me, Matt from International Homeless Art It had me, I was on the board for a while, and they had an event in Montreal. And one of the activations that I thought was so great was they had like a table and a little tent, and it was have soup with a homeless person. So it's like the soup runs, soup kitchen, but there was a homeless person there was going to serve you soup. That's and nice. You sit and you talk to them while you eat a bowl of soup. And I thought that was so brilliant, because that, in the United States, we have mutual aid, and it's important. People need clothes, people need sleeping bags, and they go out. And the biggest value to me is that the public gets to have a positive interaction with somebody sleeping rough. Tell me the background, because it's such a unique idea. Also, we have to paint the picture for people listening. When I got off the tube, I looked on Google Maps and I started walking because I didn't think it would be in the park. And it's an old park house. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's it would have been the park keeper's house. When we were looking for a building, we do everything by community decision, so it's group decision on the big stuff, and but getting the right site was that. So we were looking at all these sites over London. I mean, society does not want a museum of homelessness, let me tell you that. We got offered a morgue in a Victorian workhouse. Right? That was a dark day. I thought we can do...
No pun intended.
Surely we can do better than that. We got offered a visitor centre at a women's prison that had shut down.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we were looking at shop fronts and stuff like that. And I don't know, there were points where we almost gave up. And then this site in Finsbury Park, Manor House Lodge, someone gave us the nod that it wasn't being used, basically. And we talked to the homelessness commissioner at Harringay Council at the time, and she really supported the project. She basically pushed it through. She now works with us. She leads on our homelessness memorial project, Dying Homeless Project. So
wow.
She's come over to the other side of the table. But that site, the community loved. Because it's domestic, it's got the outdoors as well. You've seen it, so the outdoors is much more than the indoors.
It is.
Which is the reverse of what a museum would normally be. I mean, it's basically a terrible museum building, but the perfect community site. So we went for it, but we had to negotiate with the council for 3 years. It was really hard to push through, and we've now got a long lease on it, and I really hope that we can stay, because we have been putting down roots there, and people really, really love it. Prior to that as well, we'd been able to share with friends and allies. So the Outside Project gave us a home for quite a while in a fire station that they had, and they were using as an LGBTIQ shelter. And we built a little museum where the fire engines used to be. And then Streets Kitchen as well, we shared space with them. You've been to their place on Seven Sisters Road.
You took me to some place.
Right. With like the, it's got like a community space, in a shop. And they've got the commercial kitchen at the back that does all of their streets meals, like hundreds a week. So we bounced around. Being taken in by friends. A museum without a home. Right, it was for ages.
A homeless museum.
Exactly.
Sorry, I had to go there.
No, it's got to be done. And we did set up on the streets at times as well. But with the Manor House Lodge, everyone fell in love with it. We fought really hard to get there. And people are really happy there. People really love it. It's a pretty special place. But that park is a park in London where we are meant to be. Because in that park, you have people sleeping rough. There are people sex working. There's street life in that park. Yeah. And that's our people. Yeah. So we're so happy to be there.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated, and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing. and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. When Matt was giving me a tour and he was saying, oh, there was tents over here and people sleeping here.
Yeah.
And I went, this park is open 24 hours?
Yeah.
And it is. Mm-hmm. So
it's a good park for the community. And one thing, you know, we quite often campaign to change things that councils are doing. One thing I would say about Haringey Council that was good regarding the park was that there's quite a lot of, I'm going to choose my words carefully, local interest groups who want the park locked at night.
Of course.
When they did the Equalities Impact Assessment, the council, they identified that that would be dangerous for rough sleepers and for people sex working, and they chose to not log the park.
Awesome.
Right, that's rare, isn't it?
That's extremely
We
rare.
like to celebrate these things when they happen.
Oh, yes.
So it's definitely a park where MOH should be. Like, it was built for the working classes, really, when prior to that you had the Royal Parks, you know, and then they built this one in South London as well at the same time as one. It's part of the Victorian reform to improve the life for the masses. But it's always been a park of activism as well, like the suffragettes used to rally there. You've had loads of racial justice rallies. So it's got the right energy for us.
Yeah. It just felt like it was meant to be.
Yeah,
Once
definitely.
I figured out it was in the park, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then you look at the building has got to be really old.
Yeah, 1860. Matt would tell me off for not knowing the date. He's the historian of the...
Yeah.
It's like 1868, I think, I want to say.
How did it start? You just said that you're, museum without a home for a while, so you had to have this vision.
Yeah.
And it's a very unique vision.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably because of my family history. So I obviously grew up like homeless, and it's a long and complicated story, but various situations in life. And then when I got old enough to leave home, I thought I'm going to get a job in the opposite I can think of to what I've come from, and the arts. For the arts, that sounds posh, sounds good.
Yeah,
it's what the middle classes do. I try and do that, but it never felt like I never felt complete. And I can remember trying to talk to. I tried to tell one of my bosses once in a mainstream museum I was working about my own experiences, and he was like, "Oh my God, Jess, no." He couldn't hear it.
So you worked in museums?
I worked in
So is that the foundation?
proper museums. Yeah, so I've worked in museums. Matt worked in museums.
Okay.
So he used to work at the Royal Academy, worked at the Design Museum, I worked at the Garden Museum, worked on other big heritage projects, and we were getting a bit dissatisfied with the mainstream arts anyway. We wanted to do some sort of project together. Yeah. And it came about that I got put in touch with this woman, M.T. Gibson-Watt. She's an important person in this story. She was the widow of the founder of the Simon Community. Simon Community, my dad was really involved with when he was street homeless in London. And we had our community was named after the founder, Anton Wallet Clifford. So I randomly got put back in touch with MT, and she was always like a long lost auntie. And in her attic in Wales, she's got all of this archive of the Simons it had my dad in, it had stuff in about my dad that I didn't know, like his first wife. They had what they called the Dossers wedding, this wife that I never knew about when he was homeless. And it was just amazing to find this material. And she said, "Oh, as you and Matt are museum people, could we do a project with it? What can we do?" And that's where the idea came from.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like a meeting of fate, and we wanted to make a museum. I wanted to make a museum where my community would not only be tolerated or reached out to or whatever museums say about poor people, but that our skills and talents would be really uplifted.
Right.
That's what MOH is.
Yeah.
And it's working.
Yeah. It's brilliant. Let's talk about rough sleeping. You put up a video today on social media about children dying in temporary accommodations.
Yeah.
Basically, homeless shelters,
Yeah.
hostels, places that are not really adequate housing.
Yes, from what we know, it's like B&Bs, inappropriate temporary accommodation.
Yeah. And just so people watching or listening, when you say B&B, it's not like B&Bs in the States, which are usually fancy and
No.
yeah, these are
like one room, where you've got families in one room with no kitchen for the whole of the child's development life. From what we can see from the research, this isn't research we've carried out, but we do monitor deaths of people experiencing homelessness. But from what I can tell, like the kids are dying from respiratory conditions, from mold. This bit really got me. Like freezing was known as a factor. Like babies are freezing to death in this country. Like what the hell? So
babies are freezing to death.
that's what is said in the research. Like some of the causes of death were like exposure to cold, respiratory conditions, damp and mold. So, I mean, just where are we with this? Like, it's so avoidable, and I never agree. Right, I never agree when charities say we must end homelessness. We're not going to end homelessness. That's actually not realistic. Most cultures have had some form of nomadic people. There will always be some people who are chronically homeless. That's part of our culture, and we need to build community spaces that can hold that. What we could end is this unnecessary, huge scale of economically driven homelessness, which is affecting a vast amount of the population, way more than it has previously. That's what we could end. And if we start being honest about what we can end and what we should end, then we can be clearer about the strategy. These families are in that category.
Yeah.
Those babies are dying because of political choices. And it's so heartbreaking. And just to keep watching the situation get worse and worse. And it's the same in the States, right? Yeah. It's just snowballing. Yeah. And the rhetoric and the policies are just not fixing it. And that's one of the most infuriating things. Yeah. It could be solved.
Right. And it's getting worse.
It's getting worse. And the other day I had a moment where I felt really overwhelmed by it. And you must have these moments as well, because we're working sort of in it. You're doing narrative change, but you're also frontline. You're out and about on the streets as well, aren't you? And we're doing similar. So we're trying to influence policy change, but our people are coming into the site every day in massive levels of distress. And sometimes it just feels really overwhelming because our work requires us to look at it at scale. And sometimes that can feel a lot. Right. Because it doesn't seem like it's turning around, does it?
No. And your work, you see the individual because you're offering community support, but you're also trying to tell the story of the economic crisis, lack of affordable housing, everything else that is causing homelessness.
Yeah, it's wealth extraction, and it's so clear, like what's causing it, and also with us is public policy. The public policy has been bad since 2010, and that's this. I am not party political at all. Actually, I would view MOH as completely outside party politics. We're doing our own thing, but we do intersect with it, and successive governments have all made these choices. So it's not really about left or right.
Yeah,
it's more about. I think it's more about the lobbyists, where the money's coming from, who the donors are.
This work has never been easy. 30 years ago, I was homeless. I've been doing this for almost 18 years. And I worked as case managers in different shelters and family case manager. And there was always, I'll put it like this, it was easier to find hope. You would see people, you would have to hold on to the stories of somebody that you got into housing because more people slipped through. But you had enough of those stories in your memory to keep going, right? oh yeah, there is success now and then. It is so hard now to keep going because those people going into housing are not nearly enough of what they should be. And the crisis continues to get worse, that it's just hard to stay in it. So in the States, you're seeing people on both sides, it's not right or left, that are aggressively working to criminalize homelessness.
Yeah.
That will make it worse. And it's like, where is the compassion? Where is the empathy? And it makes you have to question even yourself, why am I doing this when nobody else is? And for me, it's like, if not you, who? I don't think I could do anything else now. You probably feel the same. And it shouldn't be this hard.
It does feel, looking forward to the next, I don't know, like 5-10 years as well. It does. It feels a lot. We're obviously thinking about a hard right win here in 2029. You guys are already in that. You're in that policy drive. Like we've been watching with like interest. You know, like I just want to say solidarity, because it looks really, really hard. The executive order that Trump put out about, was it the law and order one? Regarding the street.
All of them.
All of them. The flood the zone, like, you know, bamboozle, that's one of the strategies, isn't it? But that drive towards criminalisation, it's not the same here, and I'm always careful not to make the two the same, but we have traced the particular think tanks which are influencing legislation, not even just policy, but actual lawmaking in both sides. And so you can see it and you can sort of feel it. And particularly in response to encampments, we're seeing more here. That's been part of the drive, hasn't it, in America as well?
Well, it's interesting to me anyways, because I used to come here more often than COVID happened. So I don't cross the pond as much, but I would never see tents in London.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, I'm sure they were there at some point. But now you walk the Strand or you go to different parks, there's tents. You know, you're starting to see encampments, which I never used to see before.
No, I mean, we have had them. So Bullring Bash is so called because he was in the infamous Bullring. In the IMAX in Waterloo, and that existed for quite a number of years.
Whoa, you gotta cut. So Bullring Bash, I thought was some fictitious name or something.
Bullring Bash is the name of a person who was in the Bullring.
Okay.
So the Bullring. So if you're a homelessness history nerd, which we are, and someone's got to be, but the Bullring was quite an infamous encampment in Waterloo in the like late 80s through 90s. And it was actually a cardboard city that moved around, but it eventually settled in Waterloo. And they called it Cardboard City then because it wouldn't... I think one of the things is like the availability of cheap tents, right? Yeah. So that wasn't a thing then. So people would make bashes. And, you know, and bash is literally because you'd bash it together. And people's bashes were in the Bullring were apparently pretty ornate, pretty amazing. It had its own postcode after a while, and the postman used to deliver there. They had a club down there. I mean, it was quite an intense place by all accounts.
How many people?
I think there was a few hundred there.
Wow, that's a big community. And when was this?
I mean, it was like in the 90s was its peak.
And John was there?
He was there. So he is, one of our very esteemed elders in the community. Because he lived it. Yeah. And we've got other people who are involved in MOH who might have gone there and stuff, but he was actually in the Bullring and living there. Princess Diana went down there.
Okay.
Famously without security, which is pretty cool, and like people have never forgotten it. Like, didn't take the press, didn't take a big security squad. Probably had just a couple of plainclothesmen with her, but went down there and actually hung out, chatted to the guys, got to know everyone that was down there. So, yeah, it was pretty famous.
Yeah.
So we have had encampments.
Yeah.
But then I'd say from late 90s to like since COVID, really, they're coming back.
Yeah.
And it causes a moral panic. I do think the availability of cheap tents on Amazon and stuff like that has made tents more. But yeah, I mean, and the sector is just up in arms about it.
Yeah.
You know?
So for those of you that are watching or listening, John Bullringbash and I have a long history, and it was a magical time back then. And a big part of it was, and a lot of my early work, lived experience work, was framed on what was happening over here. So your mobile phone carriers were loading Twitter on the phone, and here you could get unlimited data, text, phone for like 15 pounds, which is $20 in the US. So for a homeless person in the US, it's like $100. They have cheap providers now, but they're governed, they're throttled. So there was a large community here in London, probably all throughout the UK, that were using social media. And that is how I first connected with John and some others. And in fact, there was a veteran in Carson, Nevada, who you would think very conservative. And there was a transgender homeless woman here in London that kept on getting kicked out of shelters. And she would tweet about it, and this veteran was encouraging her. And I would want, exactly. And, you know, here's America, you know, the United Kingdom, veteran, conservative, transgender. And, you know, she was having a real hard time. And he was like, don't give up, don't give up. And I thought it was gorgeous, and I wanted the world to see it. And that was kind of the start. There was another girl, homeless girl. There's John. There was a whole group of people sleeping rough here.
Street camper.
Yeah, there was a whole group that were using social media, were interacting with. And John was infamous because he was always, I want to say this correctly. He would never let any of the chief executives here have a moment of peace. They all knew him because he's always, you know, talking about him, or he's always including them on social media and calling them on their shit. You know what I mean? Whether he's right or wrong. And they all knew him. They talked about him. And I interviewed John a couple of times. The second time, he was in the hospital, and they had no issues with me coming in, and because he's still sleeping rough. And it really stuck with me. And I was really grateful that you guys reconnected. I mean, you've been connected with him, but kind of kept me in the loop, and then let him know that I was coming. So I was able to see him, and he's as ornery as ever. And I have to say, probably so am I.
He's his perfect ordinary self. Exactly. That was do you say halcyon days, like the halcyon days of Twitter? Yeah, that was brilliant. That's how we met him. Boring. We met
really?
him. We met him on Twitter. There was quite a few people really active. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And we rough tweeters. The rough tweeters. Yeah, right. So people sleeping out, tweeting for England. And it's really not the same anymore. No. Actually, that was really good. That in that period on Twitter as well, then COVID happened. And this was how brilliant Twitter was, and we've not got a replacement for it yet. But we sort of like talking to medic friends and stuff like that, and Streets Kitchen and everyone in the first few days of the proper pandemic in March 20. We came up with this national plan to use hotel rooms and block book them, blah blah blah. And as the medics had said, would be the safest option for homeless people. And we posted it on our Twitter, pin tweet. The BBC, the Big Issue picked it up first, then the BBC picked it up, And then, lo and behold, it made its way through the ranks of the policymakers. Now you cannot do something that quickly, that effectively. Like Twitter was brilliant for that. And,
yeah, it was great. There was a serendipity about it, a magic about it. That's how I met John. That's how I met a lot of people here.
Yeah, I do miss it. Blue sky's not the same, right?
No,
it's not, is it?
There's nothing going back.
No.
It's not going back to what it was. I mean, there might be a new social media at some point that has the same kind of magic, but then, commercialism, marketing, business, because once you attach money to it and people have to make money, and I get it, you got to make money, Yeah. That's the world we live in. It changes everything.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, those were the days. And he is brilliant, isn't he? But yeah, so that's how we got to know him. He's been an amazing friend.
Yeah.
And it's been an absolute honour to know him.
Yeah. He's a character.
He's
definitely a character. You do a bit of campaigning.
Yeah.
Tell me what works, what doesn't work, how people can support you.
The campaigning really is, what can I say? We've always been more of an outsider campaigning. So the large homelessness charities will lobby internally and they have the resources to do that. We're more of probably a direct action protest, do creative stuff to get people's attention. I think why our campaigning works though, and it does change policy, it does influence policy, is because it actually comes from the streets. So it's as quick as, we could be at someone's sleep site and they say this is happening and we go live with it. Or someone can come into the museum and say this is a problem at the moment. We can build our campaign on it. A larger charity can't do that because they've got layers of sign off and because it's real issues of the moment. And I'm not sleeping rough. So we, well, some people in the museum are, some aren't, but we prioritise those views of people who are sleeping rough right now or in emergency accommodation right now.
It's driven by your community.
It's driven by people who are actually in it now. That is what we campaign on, and I think that's why policymakers, politicians, they can feel that. And so they are starting to listen. People can support by following us on socials, amplifying the message, obviously donating. It's always welcome. If people are in the UK and if they're in London, they can join our cook crew because we cook for 50, 60 people at a time, and you've seen the kitchen is tiny. We have to get creative, but we make it work. And our cook crew are all volunteers, they're amazing. So we're always looking for cook crew, and we're always looking for people to support and amplify, really.
We talked about kids dying in temporary accommodations. And we talked a little bit, the Bullring Bash, the Waterloo, the tent community. Tell me about, how do you build community?
I'll tell you a story that's related to sleeping rough in London. It's not mine, but it's my dad's story, but
sure.
It relates to how we build community as well. So when Dad must have been in his like late 20s, whatever, and he told this story about this time. You know how in families you have stories that get told at Christmas when you're gathered, and they sort of like knit the family culture. It becomes part of your identity, who you are. He used to always tell me and my brother this story about him and his mates. They were sleeping rough in Villiers Street, which is just off the Strand to the Embankment station. And the authorities at the time, it was pre-GLA, but the London Authority at the time was starting to hose them down, right? And they were coming down every night about 4 a.m, hosing them down whilst they slept. And they were using fire engines to do it. And Dad used to tell us, he said, listen, we could have moved on. We could have given up. We didn't. We got together, we hatched a plan. And what they did was they found out where the engines were coming from, and it was at the other end of the Strand of the Aldwych. They stayed up all night. They waited. They jumped on the back of them, and they started letting the water out. So by the time the engines got to the sleep sites, there was no water to be had. They did that for a few nights, and the authorities backed off. And for years, I just absorbed the story, didn't really know what the teaching was. But the teaching was, if you get creative and you stick together, you can fight anything. And then when we were in COVID, we were out on the streets a lot, actually just checking in with people on their sleep sites. because there was no one about in the West End and people were vulnerable. So we worked with the Simon community. We'd do the bedtime check-in. We'd do sandwich and a cup of tea with people in that same area, just off the Strand. And then one day, one of the guys, street camper, who we're working with, he's amazing, he said they've been hosing us down. I was like, I don't fucking believe this. Like all those years later and they're still doing the same thing. And it was lockdown. All the day centres were shut. Yeah. Libraries were shut. There's nowhere for them to dry off. That winter was so cold that Trafalgar Square fountains froze over for a week. And they're hosing people down. So, you know, that is when I sort of like, I thought of my dad in that moment. I was like, right, what should we do? What hatch a plan? We did a big campaign on it and we got Westminster Council to back off. And it put a ring of fire around that street for the next 18 months. They all stayed there in peace, and that was a teaching from my dad, really. And I think it just shows that the problems haven't really changed, and the solutions haven't really changed. You know, it's about really working together and fighting back and having the courage and creativity to get around it. And you can do a lot if you build community.
Yeah. What are your community building secrets?
I think really listening to what people need and making it happen. And we see the Museum of Homelessness as like a conduit for resourcing the community. So we're a registered charity. We can get resources and we can share them as widely as possible. That's what we do. Get resources, share them. That's community building, that's community power. And not just tangible resources, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's a housing deposit for someone who hasn't got that, and otherwise they'll hit the streets. Sometimes it's socks. Thank you for bringing socks the other day, because we had run out. But, you know, sometimes it's actually resourcing people through sharing cultural capital. You know, getting people into meetings, getting people into rooms they might not else get into. And the museum, we always said it's like a stealth vehicle because it is a museum. Yeah. So the museum can get into like Parliament or the major galleries or, you know, and suddenly it's like the whole community's there. So I think that the most important thing we can do at the moment is look after each other, share resources and really listen to what people need. For me and Matt, it's a constant check on you know, we do have more power than other people as the leaders of the thing. And I think when you try and devolve power completely, that goes wrong. So I don't believe in like flat organising structure. I don't think that works. So I think whoever's in that leadership role, you have to be honest about that and have checks and balances in place to make sure that you don't go off track. So we've got all that built in. That's very important as well.
Do you guys have Chipotle's here?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So I have a friend, he posted the other day and talking about this. And he says, you know, when I go to Chipotle, they don't ask me 2 years after I eat the burrito, how was it? They ask me the feedback right then, because we should be asking people that are sleeping rough or in the shelter about their experience right now, not somebody that got off the streets 5 years ago.
I love that Chipotle thing as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that.
Well, and you can fit it to whatever, you know, restaurant you buy something. You don't wait 2 years to say, oh, how did we do? How was our service? No, they ask you you know, fill out the receipt or here's a number to call. You know, they want the feedback right away, but we don't do that.
We don't. And I think there's a lot about lived experience where it's tokenized.
Huge.
It's quite problematic in some ways. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. Have you read the Trauma Industrial Complex by Darren McGarvey? I highly recommend. It's good. Okay. But I don't agree with everything in it, but it made me really think because, you know, so I live with complex trauma and, you know, all of that is part of me. But he talks quite interestingly about, as trauma survivors, we are often encouraged to make cultural capital out of our story. And the sectors are set up to do that. The arts is terrible for that. And, you know, and the homelessness sector as well. And it's one way that if we're completely honest, as trauma survivors, it's one way we can get validation. You know, he said some things in that book I've never heard say about lived experience before. And he can say it because he is a trauma survivor. Yeah. And I can agree with him because I'm a trauma survivor and I've done a lot of thinking about like what role I play in a museum, how much of my story is in it or not. What am I getting out? How am I validated by that? And yeah, I think the idea of current lived experience, or like Bullring calls it living the experience, rather than lived experience, that's so key for policy. Is so important, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And for practice change, like how are we going to do it if we're not listening to people who are doing it right now?
Extremely important. Tell me about the new, do you call it exhibition?
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah.
And when's it open and how people can participate or donate?
Yeah, that's how they can support. They can come to the show. That's our number one thing at the moment. So it's free. We would really love to have a great audience for it because the community's worked so hard on the research. So it's basically called Criminal, an untold history of homelessness, resistance and survival. And what we've done is our entry point was the situation right now, yeah. So the increase in criminalization. It was actually that the Fox News anchor, Brian Kilmeade, when he said people should be executed. Yeah. That was the inspiration for this exhibition.
Really?
Yeah, this is a rage-driven exhibition, right? We were like, okay, what can we do about this? We need to find out what's going on. We were like, let's research what's coming about. How is this becoming more permissible? And we've actually traced it all the way back to 1600s. Which is really cool, right? And so we're looking at 400 years of criminalisation of homelessness. We've identified this part where we call it the homelessness Big Bang, which was the first time people in the UK were made homeless en masse from the enclosures. And we found records of homeless people being transported to Virginia and Barbados pre-plantation to build the plantations. So that's a part of history that not many people know. We quite often think of the transatlantic slave trade when slavery was happening.
Right.
This is before the slave
and
code.
Homeless people.
Yes, the plantations were built in part by homeless people from the streets of London and from England and Wales. And then slightly after that, the British Empire made a lot of people homeless in Ireland with the brutal campaigns there. So it was like then the Irish were transported. Slightly after that, they started bringing people from Africa. What happened was the indentured voluntary and involuntary servants from those places were finding unity. So it's sort of like, before the class system, but it's sort of like a working class solidarity, right? And the plantation owners were so threatened by that, they basically invented whiteness, brought in the slave code, divided people on the basis of race, and have been doing that ever since with poor people. So that's one of the key themes of the exhibitions, because one of the big issues that we have right now in the UK is that there's this far-right myth that migrants are taking British homeless people's place. You know, they're in luxury hotels.
Or causing homelessness.
They're causing homelessness. They're in, these are the myths, they're in a 4-star hotel while a British veteran is on the street.
Very
pervasive.
We have the same. Yeah. I was going to use a colorful word there, but
yeah. So that's a big part of what we're exploring here, and it started there. And ever since then, sort of racism and vagrancy and the punishment of poor people, it has been racialised. It's worse for black people. It's worse for people of colour. But poor white people have also been punished and criminalised. So, but at the same time, we've all been divided. So the overall aim of the exhibition is to bring people together, help people understand, like, this is a 400-year history of division. It doesn't have to be like that. We're really excited about it, and we hope that lots of people come and see it.
When does it start and how long is it?
21st of May.
21st of May?
And it's running for 10 weeks only.
Okay.
We've got new art commissions as well. Some of the UK's foremost artists and activists have made new work for it, including Surfing Sofas, who you're talking to, I think, as well on your trip over here. We're setting up a publishing house in the museum that is going to be his publishing house, so people can make zines. And we've got 10 Foot is the UK's most prolific graffiti writer. He's written all over the world, his tag, and he's creating his first ever sculpture that's going to be in the garden in the exhibition. So we're really excited about the whole thing.
The arts seems to be so much more connected here. than in the States.
Does it?
Yeah. I mean, you go to the States and there's wonderful art programs. I'm not saying they don't exist, but here it seems very much integrated into your advocacy, into your community, into everything you do.
Yeah. There was an artist, David Tovey, I don't know, do you know him?
David
Yeah.
very well.
When we were setting up, David was really involved. Like, he was really fundamental to the museum's setting up, and he was our first artist in residence. And I'll never forget when he just said one day, he was like, listen, if you shout, people are not going to listen. If you just get angry and shout, people are not going to listen. If you make something beautiful, or if you make something special, they're going to listen. And he was talking about the persuasive nature of art. So I think it is a really important way of connecting people with the issues, you know, and the idea that a museum could ever be apolitical is absolute rubbish. Like, most of them are political, but pretend that they're not political. We are unashamedly small p political because we don't think the museum's neutral. So it's on the side of homeless people.
Yeah.
That's what it's doing.
Yeah.
You know?
So where do you see the museum in 5 to 10 years?
It's such a good question. I think we're in such a state of such a state of worry about how things are going to turn out in the next five years, certainly, that at the moment we're putting a lot of energy into strengthening and bolstering the community for that. So, you know, gathering our resources, making sure we have good allies and networks, and being ready to weather the storm. So I think rather than, as a leader, if I was to sit here right now and give you an expansive vision for, we're going to open a new building, we're going to do, that would be incorrect to how we're all feeling. We're really feeling like we need to batten down the hatches and protect people and get through this as best we can. And so that's actually what MOH's strategic plan is right now.
Yeah.
So we'll still be making exhibitions, we'll be running the shelter, we'll be doing everything that we do, and we'll be challenging whatever politics we need to. But it really is about, you know, how many people can we get through this?
What gives you hope?
I think the connections that we see every day, there is still hope, because there is still possibility. And I witness more people being kind to each other than the opposite. I think online is really so extremely polarised, but I read a stat the other day that it's like 7% of users on X make 70% of the horrific, like really frightening shit, right? So they call it this, what do they call it? The funhouse mirror.
Yeah.
It makes us really panic. So that's why we do so much in real life connection.
Yeah.
Because like you're, actually that happened online, but you said about the transgender woman and the vet, conservative vet. Like, I love that, because we do see that on site. Like, we have a lot of queer, trans, non-binary community members. We have a lot of community members who are like, you know, like guys who have been out on the streets for 30 years. And you would think those people shouldn't understand each other. That's the story that we're told. I see people taking care of each other. Like, that gives me hope.
It's and I haven't thought about this in a long time. Back right before I was homeless, I was significantly addicted to drugs. I was doing a lot of really bad stuff. My mind was, you know, like there was a dark cloud over me, and there was a corner on Lancashire Boulevard, and I would walk out on the corner, and I would see the car being broken into, and I would see the drug dealer, and I would see all this negative, right? When I got sober, I remember, you know, a couple years later after I got sober, I remember walking out on that same corner, that same street corner, and I'm sure the negative was still there, but now I saw the flowers, and I saw the person helping the old woman across the street. And, you know, I'm just making up examples, but it was like night and day, because back when I was always thinking negative, I only saw negative. And once my thinking changed, same street corner, I saw a whole different view.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big part of it, isn't it? Just shifting the lens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why your work is so important.
Yeah, thank you. We say joy is an act of resistance.
Yeah.
It's a Toy Derricott, American poet, and we've got that on badges actually, but we try and live that on the site. It's not just about the survival, is it? There's that finding joy together.
Yeah.
That's the key.
How do people support you? Do you have a website?
Yeah, they can support us at museumofhomelessness.org. There's a support us page where people can donate or volunteer. And yeah, if they're in the UK or if they're coming to the UK, if they can come along to Criminal. And the other thing, leave us a good Google review. That is amazing.
Anything you'd like to add?
I think that's it. Thank you. It was been really nice to chat. Thank you, Mark.